Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. So I did go back in time. As you guys are probably familiar, they do have a rest day for the U.S. Championship. So I did go back to the Champions Chess Tour Finals, and I did grab a game between Wesley and Jan-Krzysztof Duda. As always, for my people in the Philippines, I would say mabuhay. Kumusta aking magkaibigan, magandang umaga. Hello, you lit. I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. Maraming salamat po sa nanonood ng aking video. Appreciate you guys very much. Mabuting pagbati to you guys. Anybody who is coming from Poland, I will say Shest, Dziękuję. Appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. But yes, if you guys are ready to go, let's take a look and see what we have for this game. So we do see c4. Knight comes to f6, and we do have the English opening to start with c4, and it is the Anglo-Indian defense. And so, you know, a lot of you guys that are d4 players, you guys see knight to f6 a lot. And I mean, that's definitely a possibility in this position. I mean, you have the ability to go d4 and just, you know, turn it into possibly like some Queen's Gambit stuff or, you know, some Catalan type situations or however you want to go play that. But we do see g3 in this position. And then we got c5. You know, so that's making it a little bit different because playing d4 here would, you know, kind of change the position quite drastically. So we do see bishop to g2, and then we have d5. Pawn takes d5. We see knight takes d5, knight up to c3. You know, we definitely have the ability to take on c3 with the knight. You know, and then you can just take back, you know, kind of however you want to, probably with the D pawn. And, you know, your queen being inconvenienced isn't the worst ever because it's not so much of an open position like an e4 situation. And then plus the queens are off the board. But we do see the knight coming back to c7. And knight is interesting because you don't ever hardly see the knight come to c7. Sometimes you'll see a knight to a6 back to c7 situation. So it's not like super rare, but in this particular position, you know, it's just interesting to see how the knight traveled like this. But we do have knight to f3. We have knight to c6. So both players just getting their pieces developed. We do have castles by white. We have e5. And e5 is actually very, very useful because not only does it open up both of your bishops, you know, it is very much preventing the d4 move. And so, you know, of course, you can't just push d4 right now because it's going to be taken either way. You know, you are a little bit inconvenienced. So we do see d3. Bishop comes to e7. We see knight down to d2. Bishop comes to d7. We see knight to c4. And then we have b5. I mean, normally the thing that kind of like makes the situation just a little bit weird is usually when I come across like situations where a b5 is played, it is an undefended pawn. But you do have, like I said, this knight on c7 that's like magically defending the pawn. So you have to move the knight. Knight comes to e3. We have castles by black. We have a4, just breaking down this little pawn right here. We do see b4. Knight c comes to d5. Knight takes d5. Knight takes d5. So, you know, everything is actually looking pretty good for both sides. I mean, they both have pretty much done what they needed to do. You know, black just actually has a little bit more space than white does. You know, they have their pawns a little bit further advanced. So they are kind of clamping down on more space than white has for their position. And then rook over to c8. A very useful move because this bishop, you know, is kind of on this diagonal pretty heavily. So moving the rook to c8 is a little bit better. We do have f4. Pawn takes f4, and then we have pawn takes f4. And, you know, going back, it's pretty interchangeable to take either with the bishop or with the pawn. So, I mean, it's not like taking with the pawn is putting you in such a severe position. You do have this bishop right in front of your king that is doing a pretty good job of giving you some protection. So it's not the end of the world, but we do see the best move in the position by Jan-Krzysztof Duda. Bishop to g4. So, I mean, up to this point, you know, Jan has played a very, very nice game. And, you know, they are preventing this move e4 because the bishop is pinning this pawn down. So, you know, black is actually doing very well. And it is a little bit of a thing for, you know, your pawn structure in front of your king to be damaged. So it's not like white is in the most comfortable position. But we do see h3. Bishop backs up to h5. And then, you know, of course, we don't have a g4 we can throw in. So the bishop is pretty much going to live there forever. We do see f5, and we have bishop down to d6. and then we see bishop to e3. Now, bishop to e3 is actually very useful because we are attacking this under-defended pawn here, and it doesn't have the best ability to push forward. And so, you know, we might be able to kind of follow up with a rook to c1, and, you know, we're putting quite a bit of pressure on this pawn. So we have actually reached a point in the game that if you want to pause the video and see what Duda has the ability to play in this position, to try to start taking advantage of, you know, the openness of the king and, you know, this undefended pawn temporarily, and just white's position in general. Go ahead and pause the video and do so. Okay, cool. So one of the things that I really want to say about the position, you know, you have a couple of different options. I mean, you have like rook moving over, you know, and you have, you know, you have knight coming back to e7, which knight to e7 is actually the best move in the position. But of the couple of things, like I said, that you want to be paying attention to is the openness of the king, and, you know, the fact that white actually kind of has, you know, this backward pawn, so they don't have as much space as you'd like. They just definitely have some weak points. So we actually see rook to e8 in the game, but like I said, I'm looking for knight back to e7. One of the other things that you need to notice about the position is the fact that white has this really, really nice, strong, centralized knight. So when you're black and you're looking at the position, you're thinking, okay, what is white's best piece? And a lot of the times you can trade off your opponent's best piece for one of your pieces that aren't as good. And that is definitely this knight. So when we take the knight back to e7, you know, we are threatening to just take this knight off the board. And so you would actually probably see a bishop to g5 trying to pin. But after we saw f6, the bishop would come back to f4. We'd see rook over to e8. And I mean, you're not so much in a hurry to trade. Also because you just opened this diagonal. So it's not super beneficial, but it's definitely not the end of the world. Knight would take on e7, queen would take on d7. You'd see bishop to d5 would check, but then bishop coming back to f7, and then you would see queen to b3. And you can see that, you know, this has also opened up the e file. So now you kind of have some problems with your pawns. And you are definitely capable of taking on f7, and then the king taking f7, and then trying to put in d4 or e4. But you are going to be looking at c4. And I mean, you're just trying to undermine this pawn chain. It is not that heavily supported. So you're definitely going to be losing some material at some point. So if you guess knight to e7 or even rook to e8, you would have the right idea. You know, this is a somewhat loose bishop if this knight is taken off the board. So, you know, you might get some material. But we did see rook to e8, like I said, and then that allows f6. Still doing good. You know, bishop comes down to e5. We see queen up to d2. And now we finally, you know, unpinned our queen and also given the bishop a little bit of, you know, support behind it. Pawn takes f6. We do see king over to h1. You know, why not make your king a little bit safer? King goes over to h8. And we actually see bishop takes c5. Now, the move actually knight to d4 has been suggested for a couple of moves. And it's basically just a way to like plug up this you know, the attack on this this pawn, and it actually increases, you know, your positioning of this knight. So, but like I said, we do see king to h8. Bishop does take c5. Rook goes over to g8. We see e4. So now we finally managed to get e4 in, and I mean, the position has drastically changed for white. You know, white is actually more in the driver's seat now. They don't have as much king safety issues, even though this rook is on this nice open file. So we do see bishop to d4. Rook a comes to c1. So we're working on trying to take over that file. Bishop takes on c5. A rook takes on c5. And then we see queen down to d6. I mean, that's a little bit of a tricky move, but, you know, we do see queen to f2, protecting the rook. We see f5. And, you know, with the pawn being on this square here, we definitely were looking at queen takes here and forcing the queen trade. But now that we have moved the pawn to f5, we don't have the ability to take it right now because this rook is going to be hanging. And there's just not enough after that is done. So we do see rook f to c1. And now we have to do something about the position. So we see pawn takes e4. Queen comes up to f6 with check. Queen takes on f6. Knight takes on f6, and then we do see pawn takes d3, and this actually just hangs the bishop. So I mean, the rook takes on h5, We see rook down to G7, and then we see rook takes C6. And like I said, Duda like literally has like less than 10 seconds to play these moves that he's playing. So I mean, that thoroughly explains why he's just dropping pieces like a bad habit right now. And then so we do see rook over to D8, and then we do see rook over to D5. He was actually kind of in his short calculation putting a lot of weight behind this pawn, but there just isn't any weight left. You cannot absolutely, you absolutely cannot take here because the rook is going to be coming on to C8 and you're going to be getting back rank mated because, you don't have this square as a possibility once the rook takes here. So we do see rook G to G8 and then the knight takes on G8. And like I said, that is classical time trouble. I've dropped many pieces in my day being in time trouble. And I've also missed, some chances on my opponent's side, from being out of time. So, yeah. So unfortunately, just like Back to the Future, he was out of time. Any of you guys that saw that movie, you guys saw his license plate said out of time. So very interesting. If you haven't watched any Back to the Future movies, definitely watch them. They are very entertaining and just definitely thinking outside the box movie-wise. So I appreciate everybody very much for stopping by. Maraming salamat aking makaibigan. Jen Koyechi, Makito tayo mamaya, and I will see everybody next time.